want to talk today about the last three Forging Freedom events. We've discussed child sex trafficking. We're kind of expanding our reach as a foundation to include child exploitation, and specifically child sex exploitation. Most of you have heard who our speaker is today. It's Detective Jason Weis. We became involved with Jason actually in part because of his project. He and his wife started the Demand Project, and they have, it's kind of a crazy thing, but they've got this neighborhood basically in Oklahoma that was donated to their foundation that they're prepping and preparing to house trafficking victims. It'll be the largest trafficking rehabilitation center in the country. And so that's how we came in contact with Jason. He actually came to Logan and did an event for our company as well as our community. Is it getting warmer in here already? Not yet. All right, just me. But he came and hosted an event in our company, in our community, where he showed the effects, and we'll talk about this today, obviously, of what happens on social media apps. He did a live demonstration for us, which was just beyond shocking. Some of us that saw that can tell you more about that, and he'll obviously talk a lot about that today. Because we became more exposed to this, I'd say feeder to the, some of the even bigger problems. This is something that really impacts all of us around children, and many or most children are exposed to these social media apps. And so we really wanted to have him come today, and we're excited to hear more what he has to share with us. So let me talk a little bit about Jason Weis. He has been fighting child sex trafficking and exploitation for over 10 years. He's consulted with multiple governmental agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And his work as a detective has led to numerous arrests and convictions of sex offenders. He and his wife, like we mentioned, co-founded the Demand Project back in 2013 to eradicate child sex exploitation and trafficking. And like we mentioned, in about a couple of months, their new Mount Aruka facility in Oklahoma will open and start taking on children that are surviving trafficking victims. So now I'm going to have you turn your attention to this video, and this will introduce Jason.
Well, this is a Friday morning just before 10 a.m. I logged into Kik as a 14-year-old girl, posted in a chat room that's just a general chat room, and just asked if there's anybody in Tulsa. And then this guy hit me up and asked me if I was really 13, and then immediately follows up by asking for a picture and letting me know that he likes younger girls and if I liked older boys. And then right after that, not even within 30 seconds, he asks me if I want to see his penis. I would say 100% of the kids that are on this particular app are seeing the same thing. I'm not at all surprised that this happened so quickly. There are predators lurking on this app, and they jump at an opportunity to reach out to young kids. Hi, my name is Jason Weis, and I'm the co-founder and president of an organization called the Demand Project. I've conducted several undercover operations posing as a 14-year-old girl on social media. Online sexual exploitation is a growing epidemic. It's happening in your community, it's happening in your neighborhood, and potentially happening in your own home. The good news is that you have the power to protect your child from online predators. It starts with education. Educating yourself, educating your family, and educating the community.
All right, if you can welcome me, or join me in welcoming Jason Weis.
Well, thank you very, very much for allowing me to come and speak on a pretty heavy topic. And one thing that I want to do is I want to acknowledge Sam. I've gone to a lot of conferences. Before I was even in law enforcement or had a nonprofit, I used to do these types of conferences, and there's a lot of options and a lot of opportunities to do after hours. There's dinners and different things that people do to wine and dine people, but to witness this and to see what Sam and everybody at Malouf is doing is a huge. I mean, it's amazing to see, and so I just want to acknowledge him. And if you guys can, and you guys, I mean, look at you guys. I mean, you guys are here when you could be doing anything. It's Las Vegas, and here you are coming to listen to a detective that has a nonprofit that fights against sexual exploitation of children, which is not a very comfortable topic, and you're here. So all of you guys deserve a round of applause, but I especially want to acknowledge Sam and everybody from Jake. I mean, everybody in the Malouf Foundation, and Malouf is just, they are the salt of the earth. So thank you. Give them a round of applause, please. And so before I get started, I want to just do a couple things. I noticed a lot of you guys were looking at the banners that are in the very front. There's 2 hanging banners that are on the very outside, and they are actual conversations that I have had with bad guys. So when you see them, that's just not stock image. You can see the source on the very bottom. And one of them over here on the very right is, you can read it, is at the very bottom, it's Cole Griffin. It's an individual that I arrested in Oklahoma last year. And not to get too into it, but there's a crime, it's a growing crime called sextortion. And it's where someone will get a photo of someone and demand more photos, and if they don't get more photos, they're gonna send that image to their family, the child's family, or their network of other people, and so it really gets very threatening. And during that conversation, which isn't on there, but I posing as a 14-year-old girl, which is what I do at the police department. I do a lot of undercover work. Posing as that minor, I wanted to see how far he would go, and so because he's threatening me, he's doing a countdown even. He's even counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you don't do it, this is what I'm gonna do. I threaten to hurt myself or to harm myself or to kill myself, which happens. I mean, you could Google sextortion, and there's a lot of kids that have actually committed suicide. There was one in Utah a couple of years ago that it was a boy that actually killed himself because the person demanded more and more. But in that conversation, I say, I'm going to kill myself, and he says, that's on you. I want those photos. And then the other one over here is a guy by the name of Christopher Murray. If you go look at it, take a picture of it, share it, make these guys famous. He did not care that my mom was home. And he was going to sneak into my bedroom while my mom was sleeping and have sex with who he thought was a 14-year-old girl. So those are really important images that you guys need to look at. And then also, the presentation I'm going to do it's normally a workshop, and so keep that in mind when I'm talking to you guys, because this is normally it's grown to a 5-hour workshop, and then I do an abbreviated one. It's about 2.5 hours. So we're doing this in 30 minutes. But right here, this is a really, really key takeaway, and the Malouf Foundation put a lot of effort into this. This is a powerful piece of information. So even on your Facebook page or your Twitters or your whatever, take pictures of this and post it so that you can share this, because this is what this is all about. This is about empowering you and equipping you and giving you information that can literally save lives. I'm telling you, I'm not exaggerating. This can save lives. So I just wanted to have those. So you got your tip sheet and you got your hanging banners. That's what I wanted to cover. And so I've been thinking a lot about what I wanted to talk about today. And I know there's going to be some slides that I'll be able to go through. But, you know, I'm almost 50 years old. And so I didn't grow up naive. I didn't grow up in a bubble. I knew, you know, based on history, that there is evil in the world. And you know, I follow history. I've seen the evil that man can do to people. But man, one night in 2004, my wife and I were living that normal life in Tulsa, or in Denver, Colorado, and a story came on. And it was about a dad that raped his own 2-year-old daughter, and he videotaped that and put it on the internet for the world to see. And the story continued to say that thousands of men logged in, or thousands of IP addresses, thousands of other people logged in to watch this abuse. And that was that, as a father, I had a baby in her bassinet and a 2-year-old son in the other room. That was that fist-clenching moment, you know, as a dad, that, man, who can do that? Who can do that to a child? You know, and so it really kind of sent us down this path of, we can't live a normal life. We all have those defining moments, right? We have defining moments where something just stops us in our tracks, and we're like, okay, we have to do something about this. So it wasn't one of those things that we heard and we go, man, that's terrible. What's for dinner tomorrow? That wasn't an option. And so we, it's a long story, but we launched our lives into fighting this, and to the point at 43 years old, I became a police officer, and then worked my way up into the ranks and became a detective. And now I'm, there's some really good things happening. And if you saw that last slide, I was a former detective with the city of Jenks. an opportunity came up with the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office, and the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office is bringing me on, and we're going to make Tulsa County a model, and it's going to be pretty powerful. So keep your eye on Tulsa County for sure. Now this presentation, when I do this, or this workshop, isn't meant to scare you. I don't want you to go home and be just scarred or feel like this is just too big of a topic and I don't know what to do. And I've had a lot of people go home and say, I'm going to take my kids' phone and blah blah blah. You can't do that. You have to adapt to this world, because it's not going to go away. Social media is not going to go away. The technology is not going to go away. But you have to live within it and learn how to adapt and communicate with your child. And I talk about this a little bit in this presentation, but create a culture. Like the Malouf Foundation, they've created a culture, and everybody in this room knows what that culture is. It's about protecting kids. It's about helping victims of sex trafficking. So the same thing you have to do in your own lives is create a culture in your family to where a child, if something like this is happening, and I'll say it more than once, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when your child or a child that you know is going to be approached. So, like I said, this isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to empower you and to give you a strategic foundation so when you go home and when you leave this and you go into your community, into your home, into your business, you have at least a foundation. And one thing that I want to stress is that this is just the beginning. You're going to get some information. Yeah, it's going to be great, but this stuff changes all the time. And like in law enforcement, we have to have continuing education. I have to have a certain amount of hours, and I have to have mental health hours to stay relevant in my profession. And I don't know if that's the case in your guys' profession, that you have to be certified in certain areas to be relevant, and so you know what you're talking about. So you know what the current trends and stuff are. But make this your continuing education. Keep this as a foundation, and then as you move forward, stay on top of this stuff. At the very back of this, there's a bunch of websites that you can go to. I would recommend doing that. Just be focused on recognizing these things and talking and learning about it. So at the very end of this, I talked about educating yourself. So let's start with that.
This is a Friday morning.
I don't like to be behind a podium, so I'm going to jump down here with a microphone. Is that going to be okay? All right, cool. All right, cool. Can you hear me? Awesome. Okay, cool. So let's test your knowledge. Am I a lot louder now? Should I hold it out here? I can see you guys' face. That's great. Okay, so starting with the education, I want to ask a question that will probably be a little bit shocking to you once you see the actual answer, but what percentage of online predators use social media to gain personal information about their victims? Here's your options. Is it 25%? Is it 32%, 82%, or 66%? Now these are guys that are hunting for children, that are going on social media to gain special information about their target, like where they go to school, who their parents are, what their favorite likes and dislikes are. This is the percentage of what the information that they use to find their victims. Who can give me who has an answer, or who thinks they know? 82%. You looked at one of the banners. Okay, but you're right. That's a startling statistic when you think about it. Think about how much information you guys post on your social media. Now, reverse or think about a bad guy hunting for children. They're gaining that information, and it's ammunition so that they can groom and become like-minded or have the same interests as that child. So 82% of online predators that are seeking children go to their social media sites to find out what their likes and dislikes are. Here's another one. What percentage of internet sex crimes against children are never reported to police? 75, 58, 26, or 43. These are cases that actually, or this is where a guy actually reaches out to a child and it's not reported to police or parents. Anyone? Okay. 75%. So, we all are seeing stories. I mean, it's becoming more prevalent on the news. In Vegas, in Utah, in Oklahoma, people are being arrested for this crime. But still, 75% are not reported. One, because the guys are really good at grooming, and so they're telling this child not to say anything. And another part of it is they don't know what the reaction of the parents are going to be. Are they going to take their phone? Are they going to be grounded? Are they going to lose their privileges? So there's a big reason why that's not reported. And so just to give you an idea, and I don't have this, there's not a statistics slide up here that shows the amount of number, but I did some hard crunching on Department of Justice statistics on kids that are reached out by predators and how many actually meet, and I mean there's a bunch of statistics, but I boiled it down because if you Google it, there's over 30 million kids that between the ages of 13 and 19. 30 million. So if you boil those statistics down, what it actually ends up being is 5 million. 5 million kids are reached out or sexually exploited online. And remember the statistic of 75% aren't reaching the parents or the police department? So if we're at 5 million that we know about, how many are we not knowing about? So trust me, I don't like to over emotionalize or throw a lot of hyperbole on something like this because it's already startling. But if we're only talking about 5 million that we know about, we're looking 10, 20, 30 million kids are being sexually exploited and nobody's knowing about it. So who are the predators? Boy, wouldn't it be great if we could just know who they are? In our mind, we want it to be the boogeyman, the creepy old guy, or some gross slob that we can identify and say, yeah, that's it, that's him. It's not that case. It's people that we interact with all the time. You can't get in your mind a certain image of a bad guy because they change, or they're people in the community, they're people that we know, they're people that are influential. I mean, look at some of the last few arrests that have been made: family doctors, youth softball coach, church music directors, soccer coaches, which, okay, so I'll talk about the soccer coach here in a second. But so how are predators reaching children? Obviously we have social media. A few years ago, before smartphones and all that stuff came out, we had AOL and Yahoo Messenger. You guys remember all those? And actually a few years ago, that's when the Catch a Predator was really big, and you saw all those arrests. That was just 2 platforms that we knew about. Now we have all of these. And these are some of the more popular apps that are out there right now: Kik and Whisper and Facebook and Yubo. Some of these are okay, like Instagram. It's as long as you're monitoring what your kids are doing, that's going to be an okay app. But there's a lot of them on here that are just, they should not be on your kids' phone. Like, how many of you guys have heard of TikTok? TikTok's a fun app, but I'll tell you, it's the #1 predator app right now for finding kids. And there's a lot of startling things about that app that concern me, especially being in law enforcement and as a parent. With TikTok, if I'm a bad guy and I find a child that I like, I can take her video and put it on my Instagram. So if I got a bunch of bad guys that I'm already talking to and I find a girl or somebody on TikTok, I can take her image or her video and put it on my Instagram so all my bad guys can see it. So there's some things there that are really concerning. TikTok, they also use their real name. I mean, I've been on TikTok several times and looked at a child that was using it and then took that information and went over to Facebook and found her. So I could find her school, where she was going to school. I found her Instagram, her friends. That's another thing. Once the bad guy finds one, because of the internet and the social media, it's very efficient for these guys to reach out to multiple kids at the same time. I mean, most of the guys that I arrested had multiple platforms. Meet Me is another really bad one. But these are the options now. I mean, you got social media, which we're talking about here, messaging apps, live streaming apps. Go back to the 82%. Where the bad guys are going on social media to find information about their victims. Now kids are live streaming it. I mean, there's all kinds of platforms. There's the Yubo, the YouNow. There's all kinds of platforms that kids are using to live stream from their bedroom, and they're talking about their likes, their dislikes, they're talking about all kinds of things. So if I'm a bad guy, I'm on social media or on live streaming apps, and I'm watching them just give me all that information willingly. And then video game sites. A lot of the boys are targeted on the video game sites. Okay, so we're going to just talk about Blake Lewis for a second, because he's obviously not the typical boogeyman or the scary guy that you would think would be targeting children, but he was. Several kids. And then he got in contact with me, which I'll talk about in a little bit later. But he was a soccer coach, substitute teacher, and very popular. The group that he coached in soccer was 13 to 15-year-old girls. So when I arrested him, I brought in about 30 girls that he was coaching, and they all were like, man, we knew something was up. All the parents, they all had that gut feeling, that there was something off about him. But yeah, he had multiple victims. Popular guy, smooth talker. Okay, so this gets into the more of the practical side. So if you've got your tip sheet, this is the 5 tips that we're going to talk about for protecting your kids. We're going to talk about learning mobile apps, knowing the signs of grooming, and I'm telling you, if you have to understand that grooming is the number one tactic that predators use to gain access to kids, to get them to do what they want them to do, grooming. And the good ones are slow and manipulative, and are they target the heart. And those are the ones that I go for, because once you steal the innocence of a child, it's hard to get that back. And so I've been asked several times when I do operations or I do undercover stuff, and the guys are like automatically just saying, here's my stuff. They're like, well, go get him. I'm like, no, he's just an exhibitionist. He's just throwing it out there. It's the guys that are wanting to get to know the child and to groom them and to make them feel important and all that. Those are the guys that I target, because those are the ones that leave the longer lasting damage. Communicate with your child. We're going to talk about that, and that's one way to protect. Creating a family action plan, and then be ready to act. So what's the first thing on here is learning the mobile apps. Okay, these are some of the more popular ones, and also some of the most dangerous. Snapchat, you guys are all familiar with Snapchat, and it's still basically known for sexting and sending inappropriate photos. Instagram, if you Google that right now, it's the #1 grooming app. CNN labeled it just recently. It's the #1 grooming app. And then there's Kik. How many have heard of Kik? Okay, here's what I want you to do. When like these apps here, I want you to go and put in Kik or TikTok or Meet Me, and go to Google sometime and type those in, hit enter, and you'll get the description of each app, but then also go click the news tab, and you'll see all kinds of news stories that are associated with these apps, like this. Like this could be page after page after page of crimes against children using those apps. There's TikTok, Kik, and then there's Meet Me. Meet Me is kind of a generic off version of Facebook, but it's loaded with pedophiles. Okay, and other apps to watch for. These are some of the live streaming ones that are out there. YouNow, Yubo. Yubo is Tinder for teens, is what it's labeled as. Just what you want, huh? And then there's Bigo Live, which is there's a lot of bullying that goes on that. And then here's some here that are, everybody uses Facebook Messenger, but unfortunately they can be hijacked and used by bad guys. But then there's Scout. Has anybody heard of Scout? Okay, this is good. This is good for you guys to know, because millions of people use that. And Kik, 300 million people use Kik. You know how many people use TikTok? 500 million. So if you're not familiar with these apps and you try to go and be relevant to your child, they're going to laugh at you. You have to know these apps. And then there's Whisper. Whisper is now Homeland Security is starting to get more involved with that. And I've been talking about Kik for a couple of years. Again, it's an anonymous app that you can post, but then people can respond to you through a chat app that's within the app. It's wild, because you can see who you're talking to within a mile. I've done a live demonstration of that app, and within a mile at a church, I was talking to a pedophile. So let's talk about grooming. How am I doing on time? I gotta kick it. Okay, so what is grooming? So this is something that you take a picture of it, take your tip photos or tip sheets with you, but child grooming is when someone builds an emotional connection with the child to gain their trust for the purposes of sexual abuse. It's desensitizing, it's the manipulation, it's the deception, it's that slow turning up the heat to get what they want. And so what you need to know about grooming is it's the #1 tactic that predators use to lure children. Grooming is a process, it's not an event. And that's something that I really, really, really want to stress. It doesn't just boom happen and it's done. This is a slow, methodical, sinister plan
that they use to slowly get information and desensitize that child to get them to do what they want, either send a photo or meet for sex. And then grooming is centered around secrecy. That is the number one. Grooming doesn't succeed, and this crime doesn't succeed unless it's secret. And so that's one thing that's super, super important, is it's grounded in secrecy, and it's not a process, it's an event. So here's a case of mine that I'm going to show you a couple screenshots of the actual conversation that I had with him so you can see. But his name is Anthony Peterson. We met on Facebook Messenger. And when I asked him, when I interviewed him, how he found me, it was a random encounter. It was a suggested friends. So it wasn't like he was out there looking. He had friends that were my friends, and then I came up on a suggested friends list, and he goes, oh, she's cute, and just hits a friend request. That's how random this stuff can be. So he had multiple victims. In fact, unfortunately, fortunately, I guess that we stopped it before it got even worse. But when I arrested him and the news broke that night, I got a call from his biological sister thanking me for getting this monster out of their family, because he was hurting and molesting cousins for years and nobody did anything about it. So graphic sex talk, and he sent graphic photos. But he was a master manipulator. He started slow and then slowly ratcheted up. And here's a couple of the actual screenshots of his conversation. You can see where I say that I'm 14. So he acknowledges my age, or our age. But then here's the grooming side of this. Right here he says, I like to build race cars, I like movies, and a few other things that shouldn't be talked about or shouldn't be mentioned. And so that's that segue. Oh, what do you mean? And then boom, it leads into another part of the conversation of being more adult and sexual dialogue. But that's where it starts, something small like that. And here's some more. You can actually see here, yeah, and he likes to talk about naughty things, that's all I'm saying. But I don't want to say because you're too young. So he's acknowledging her age and that what he wants to do is naughty and he shouldn't be doing it. So knowing the signs of grooming. If your child's being groomed, they might be secretive with their online activity. They'll receive unexpected gifts like money or clothes. A couple of the guys that I arrested, like the last guy I arrested before I left Jinx Police Department, he was bringing me a brand new phone because my profile is a 14-year-old girl and all I had was a stinking old iPod. And he's like, well, I'll take care of that. So he was going to bring me a brand new phone. So that he was going to bring me a new phone. And then another guy that I arrested, his name was Michael Bell, out of Jinx. He actually, during our conversations, he was going to take off work, come pick me up, go to his house, and have wine and get me drunk. But in the process of our conversation, he says, go to Amazon and pick out a really pretty red dress. So I did. I sent him the link. He bought it. So when I arrested him, I went to his house, and I found that red dress in his closet, right next to a big graphic sex toy. So you knew what he was doing. Changing passwords to avoid parental monitoring. Kids will isolate themselves from family and friends. If your kid, when they first get home, goes right upstairs and gets on their phone, have a conversation. That's a red flag. And then shows signs of anxiety, anger, or depression, especially if they can't get online. If they can't get online because they can't talk to the person that's getting groomed by them, they're going to show those emotional outbursts. So know this stuff here, because those are red flags. Communicate with your child. These are some of the things you can say. Talk to them and say, has anybody ever approached you about anything inappropriate, about sexual things online? What should you do if someone makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe? And do you know how to report, flag, or block someone from the apps that you're using? It's really important for you to know, especially how to take screenshots. If it's on Snapchat, if it's on Instagram, if it's on any of these social media platforms, understand how you report them and document the conversation so that you can take that to the police department. And then this is an uncomfortable conversation you have to have. I mean, if we have kids, we've had to have some uncomfortable conversations like sex, these are just things that you have to do. Otherwise, somebody else is going to teach them. And I'm telling you, if you're not talking to your kids about these types of things, the bad guys will. The bad guys will gladly teach your kids about sex. So create a culture in your house. Talk about these things. Don't be shy. We are raising adults. We're not raising kids. So have those uncomfortable conversations because, like I said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Create a family action plan. Limit their screen time. You can do that, especially if you have an iPhone. Those are great for limiting a child's screen time. Friend them on social media, which we know that's kind of a basic deal. Monitor their online activity. Invite them to sign a family online safety agreement. In my house, my son's almost 18 years old, and my daughter's 15, and we've had a contract with them for about 3.5, 4 years, and it's a 20-point contract. And one of the things on it is if they don't have their phone on our nightstand at 9 o'clock, they lose it the next day. So it's really, really funny because about 8:50, their alarms start going off on their phone, and they're racing down to put their phone because they don't want to lose it. But they know that. It's not like we started talking about this now. We started talking about it years and years and years ago. So again, communicate, educate. And then one thing, remember the 82% of online sex crimes, the bad guy used the child's social media sites to gain the information? Okay, this is a simple one, but it's effective. Have your child like the local police department, or Glock, or NRA, okay? Because if you're a bad guy and you're looking for that vulnerable victim, and you see that they like certain types of music, but then all of a sudden you're going through their likes and dislikes, and you see that they like the Las Vegas Police Department or the Logan Police Department, you might back off a little bit, okay? So that it's not 100%, but it's definitely a deterrent. And be ready to act. When your child is targeted by an online predator, remember the following. Contact law enforcement immediately. Do not tell the suspect you're calling the police. Don't delete anything from your child's device. And do take screenshots of the offender's profile. I've had to have some really challenging conversations with some moms. The mama bear types. Okay, somebody reached out to my daughter, and so I'm going to take their Facebook page and I'm going to put it on the community's Facebook page, or I'm going to post it on mine, and I'm going to highlight this guy, and we're going to teach him a lesson. What is he going to do? He's going to delete it and start over. So don't do that. Call the police immediately. And unfortunately, they are completely overwhelmed. I can tell you from the law enforcement side. I mean, I would have stacks of cases on my desk. That's why this is so important. That's why prevention is so important. That's why it's like one of our main things at the Demand Project, and what Malouf is doing here is so important. Prevention, it has to start at home. You can't rely on law enforcement, unfortunately. You can if it gets to a certain point and it's just dangerous, but it really has to start at home. Talking to your kids, educating yourself on the apps, looking up these apps. If there's 2 calculators on your kid's app, have a conversation. You know, there's a lot of apps that actually hide things, or if there's 2 clocks on their phone, have a conversation. Look at those, because there shouldn't be 2 clocks or 2 calculators on a child's phone. There's apps out there called vault apps, where actually hide photos and videos. So educate yourself. Okay, so because of all of this, the mom that was the mother of the victim, or the potential victim of Blake Lewis, knew this. She had created a culture in her house. Her daughter did come to her. So when Blake Lewis reached out to her daughter, she came to the police department. And she goes, listen, this guy reached out to my daughter. I took over the account, okay? And I started talking with him. It was a 2-month investigation, and he was the master groomer. Started with the innocent compliments, then wanted to play truth or dare, then asked if I snuck out. I mean, 2 months, and then just adamant on me getting Snapchat. And back in 2015, Snapchat had a little bit different reputation than it does now. Back then, it was absolutely known for sexting. They've cleaned up their image a little bit. But this guy, and then it started to get romantic, and then it was every day. It was like relentless. Almost every day, every hour, it was like, where are you at? I love you. I can't believe these feelings. And then towards the end, before I arrested him, he started talking about how we couldn't tell anybody because he would get in trouble. Okay, now with the good groomers, especially after a 2-month conversation, with all the things that we had done, from the sneaking out, talking about sneaking out, and the personal things, and all the things that we talked about in 2 months, and he's all of a sudden at the end of it saying, "Don't tell anybody because I could get into trouble." I don't want him to get into trouble. As a minor child, talking to him for 2 months, I don't want him to get in trouble. And the good ones will convince that child that they don't want to get in trouble, and they'll cover for him. That's that secrecy thing that we're talking about. So, but thank God she did come to the police department, and I arrested him. Now he's a lifetime sex offender. But unfortunately, like I have on the bottom, there were still consequences. She developed an eating disorder. There were some things that happened in her life after that including bullying, and because kids in that area knew because of who he was. I mean, we broke the internet that day. I mean, he was very well known. And so it was kind of known who the potential victim was or who took over the account. But so even though he didn't actually have a contact with her, there was still consequences that were really devastating for her. So internet safety check, here's what you guys need to do. Stay up to date on the apps, which we talked about. Like the Demand Project on Facebook. At the very back of that, there's a bunch of websites to look at. But if you go to the Demand Project, like if you pull out your phone and like us right now, I update that a lot. So there's a lot of good information. Utilize the online tools and resources. Communicate with your child. Communicate. Always talk to them. Do the safety, online safety agreement. That's also on the Demand Project. If you go what you can do part, tab, click on that. There's the family safety contract. You guys can download that and then customize it for however you want for your child. And then take the OnWatch program, the OnWatch training. Now we're talking about sexual exploitation or lewd proposals or online enticement on my side, but there's a lot of overlap between what I'm talking about with the grooming and luring and sex trafficking. I mean, because the Craigslist and Backpage went away, now most of these predators or traffickers are using social media. So there's a lot of overlap. So if you do the OnWatch training, you will get a lot of education on that too, that it's very, very relevant. One thing that I wanted to say too, do we have time? Okay. I've been here for a day, okay? And so and Jake has been like the most incredible host. He's introducing me to everybody. But even in the course of that, I've talked to several other people where this is an actual relevant topic. I mean, like they can tell me like, well, this happened to me, and this happened to my daughter, or this happened to my neighbor across the street. But as we were preparing for this and I was going through the slides, I met a girl named Cheryl, and she says, hey, this is a relevant topic for me because I'm the spouse of one of these guys that you arrested. Not of one of them, but of those types of guys. And she's asked me if I had ever done anything or thought about that, and I haven't, but it's a very relevant topic because I've had that uncomfortable conversation with wives or spouses of these guys that I've arrested and had to expose and tell them what their husband was up to. And so Cheryl is going to just share for a couple minutes about this, because I thought as we were talking how impactful that would be to hear not only from the law enforcement and the child side, but also from a side that is really, you don't hear a lot about. So thank you, and I think Sam or Jake will come up after this and we'll close it out.
Thank you. Hey guys. All right, so Jason talked about that defining moment in your life, and mine was in July of 2008. I kissed my husband and I went off to work, and I was waiting for the text messages that came all day, and we used to call and talk throughout the entire day. And it was about 11 o'clock when I realized I hadn't heard anything from him, and I started to panic. I was really worried that something had happened to him. It took about another half an hour before I made a phone call, and he actually answered his phone, and he said, "I'm in big trouble." And I ran out of the building into the parking lot, and I just said, "What happened? Like, what's going on? Are you hurt?" And he said, "No, I was arrested." Like, okay, for what? And he said, soliciting a minor online. And at that exact moment, like everything that I knew, like the life that I knew, it just crumbled underneath me. Took me a couple of hours to actually find where he was. There were 3 different law enforcement agencies in town, and of course he was at the 3rd one that I went to. And he had gotten caught in a sting operation, very similar to what he does, and had been talking to a 13-year-old girl for the last couple of days, and finally decided to meet with her, and said he wanted to bring over board games and pizza. I had been with him for almost 7 years at that point, he had never shown any signs of being attracted to children or reaching out to children. I had found out a little bit earlier on that he had a porn addiction and had racked up about 10 grand in online porn. But it was adults, there were never kids involved in that, so I kind of turned a blind eye to that, and the kid thing came out of absolutely nowhere. He only got 30 days of weekend jail, where you go in on a Friday night and you come out on a Sunday night so that you can keep your job. But he worked for a school. He was an assistant in an autism classroom. Worked for a school. He'd had history in the Boy Scouts. He was a troop leader for years. So Jason mentioned that there's evil in this world. Sometimes there's evil in your home, and you don't know it. I consider myself a fairly intelligent person with my eyes open, and I had no clue. So parents, if you have any interaction with children, teachers, whatever it may be, know these signs, pick up that tip card, because the people closest in their families and in their lives have no idea. So it falls on you to keep your kids safe. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Cheryl, and thanks, Jason. I think one other thing I wanted to share is, I think as we hear a lot of this information, what hit us hardest is how impactful it is to everybody. When Jason came out to Logan, we actually got in an office and he pulled up his profile, logged onto a couple social media platforms, and a few of us were able to watch it live. And that was a life-changing event because it was geographically targeted, so we were searching for people, I don't know, within like 30 or 50 miles from where we were at. And it was within seconds, like literally seconds. I think we had half a dozen hits. And again, he doesn't bait or lure people. He just is like, hey, I'm 14, home alone, I'm bored. And the comments that came on round one aren't even really repeatable. I mean, they're not like, hey, you look cute, or we should see each other. They were beyond lewd. I mean, they were just very, very extreme. And within about 30 minutes, we watched this process that Jason outlines. It was textbook. He would actually call the shots before the comment would even come in. He'd say, well, next they're going to say, send me a picture. I'm going to say no. Then they're going to send me a picture of himself. And within about 30 minutes, we had a live penis on the screen. And it was just an exact escalation that he outlined for us. And so I think the point is that these online apps are available. Like Jason mentioned, they're so dynamically changing. And it's definitely a force of evil that is preparing kids to meet up with these really bad guys. So anyway, thank you everybody for being here today. If the point of this Forging Freedom is really just to educate and empower. However, if you do want to donate money for today and tomorrow, we're donating 100% of the proceeds from the Malouf Foundation to the Mount Aruka project that Jason and his wife are mounting through their demand project. So we want to thank Jason again for coming. He's done this a couple times now, and this is on his own time and donating his time. So we really appreciate Jason. We give him a round of applause. And then before you leave today, like Jason mentioned, that booklet is really handy. We'll be emailing out some collateral and slides from this presentation, as well as posting the full-length video on the Malouf Foundation YouTube channel. So thank you again for coming. Have a great night.